Do you feel like you've been stuck in the intermediate level in English forever? Well, if that's you, you're in the right place. Today's show is here to help you get going again because joining us is the phenomenal Naila Farhana. She's an English learning expert with nearly 800,000 subscribers on her YouTube channel.
Let's talk about why you're not progressing. It could be that you're finding yourself stuck in the intermediate plateau. So the intermediate plateau is a stage in your language learning journey when you're just stuck in the intermediate level and progressing very, very slowly, if not at all.
Nyla has helped thousands to level up from intermediate to advanced, and while I believe that reaching an intermediate level of English is a great achievement and definitely worth celebrating, the real magic happens when you push beyond. It's at that next level where you can truly begin to reap the benefits, opportunities, and rewards of being an English speaker. In today's show, Nyla and I will discuss the 3M framework to go from stuck at intermediate to regaining momentum towards speaking English fluently and confidently. And to get the most out of this podcast episode, download this free PDF guide, Crush the Intermediate Plateau. It includes the major takeaways from this episode as well as practical tips, definitions of words and phrases, challenging vocabulary that Nyla and I use throughout the episode, as well as the full episode transcript to enhance your understanding. So check out the link to this incredible resource down in the description of this podcast. And with all that out of the way, get ready to unlock your potential and elevate your English with us. Let's do this. All right, English hero, I'm here with Naila Farhana. Naila, I'm super excited for this conversation. I've got your channel here on my phone, and you've got some staggering numbers, let me tell you. So you've got 778,000 subscribers. Your most popular video has been watched over 5 million times. Those are some spectacular numbers, and you're clearly making an impact out there. So let's actually start with the basics. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And I'm curious, what led you to start making videos about learning English?
So hi everyone. My name is Nyla, and you probably haven't heard me as much yet because the majority of my audience is actually in Indonesia. You know, when somebody asks me what do you do, I never know how to reply because I do many things. You know, like I can say I'm a YouTuber, I can say I'm an English teacher, I can say I'm an entrepreneur. It's all those different things basically. Well, I think if I put it simply, I'm just someone who enjoys learning languages and happen to make a living teaching people how to optimize language learning strategies, but mostly English. With regards to your second question, which is how I started, it was actually quite accidental. I started in 2017 January, and at the time I was in the middle of my gap year. So I had just finished my master's in the Netherlands. It was like October 2016. And then after I graduated a master, I thought to myself, what do I want to do now? I was studying, I studied economics, I graduated economics, and then like a lot of my friends at the time, they were either working for banks, for the government, or like for consultancy companies. And I knew for sure that that wasn't for me. You know, like I didn't even want to take any internships in any of these fields because I just know it's not for me. And the reason why I took economics was because kind of like I was just following what my parents wanted, you know, like you go to, I mean, like you study abroad, you should take these fields of study because it's the most reliable way to get a job, getting a degree in economics. Well, after I graduated, I just didn't know what to do. And at the time, I was just taking a gap year and I just wanted to experiment a little bit, you know, like what can I do right now? And then at the time, that's when I first discovered YouTube. At the time, I was already using YouTube to either look for econometrics tutorial, watching music videos, or just playing music in the background. But I didn't know that there was a whole world behind YouTube, you know? Like I did not know people actually go there for entertainment, and there are YouTubers making a living out of it, out of YouTube. So I felt like, okay, let's give this a try. So I think about beginning of January, that's when I first uploaded my video. and after delaying it for a whole month. Yeah, and then for the first 4 months starting YouTube, I managed to get 100 subscribers. 100 subscribers in four
First
months.
milestone.
Exactly, exactly. And if I could be honest, like even the first few videos, I actually at the time YouTube was I was allowed to do this on YouTube. I'm not sure if it was allowed now. When my video is posted, I would watch it in literally 50 tabs, so they're like
Oh,
50
okay.
views.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, so the video just doesn't start at 0 views because like the more views there are, the more likely people would click. I would open 50 tabs, play the same video, put it on mute, and then just let it watch until the end. Yeah, so it was yeah, that's how I really started the early grinding days. And then after 8 months, I actually was pretty lucky because one of my videos, which talked about English accents, like the difference between Indonesian accent and American accent, it got viral. The algorithm picked it up, and then this influx of new people just came into my YouTube channel, and within a span of 3 weeks, I reached 20K subscribers.
Wow. Yeah. You
Yeah,
got a nice start
yeah,
there. And did you
yeah.
remember like looking at the analytics and seeing where these people came from? Because you mentioned that mostly your channel is watched by Indonesians and people
Mhm.
in the Southeast Asia. And
Yeah.
did you get to see where those people came from at all?
At the time, I don't even remember if I was so diligent about looking at my analytics at the time, but I do remember, but it was pretty obvious that many of these people came from that one video. I
Nice.
know for
Yeah.
sure. And at the time I used like a couple of celebrities' photos on the thumbnail. Maybe that's why people clicked it. I was like, "Oh, why is there the picture of a celebrity being put here?" Apparently, people come in, they click, and they watch a lot of them until the end. Maybe because they do appreciate the points that I made. They got value out of it, and then from there, it kind of shaped the entire trajectory of my career. Because it's like, oh, okay, a lot of these people came to my videos and they want to learn English from me. I guess I'll be teaching English on YouTube.
Hmm.
So I never really intended to teach English on YouTube. I didn't choose that. I didn't choose the market. The market chose me. In a way, I think one of my, if I could give myself a little credit, is that one of my biggest success in life is being able to marry what I love, what I
Yeah.
enjoy doing, just like language learning, and what the market wants, or what people can get a lot of value of. Like what can get me paid, which
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
English learning.
It's that like that graphic with the circles and that intersection
Yeah,
between your passions when people can
yeah,
actually pay you to
exactly,
teach them or to
exactly.
give them content. Your videos are definitely hitting a chord with learners, and
Mhm.
you're doing a fantastic job. And thank you for sharing about
Thank
that.
you.
There's so much in there. Like the question that you ask yourself, especially in your early adulthood, right? Like, what am I gonna do? What's next
Exactly.
now? What is
It's
the
mid.
career
Yeah,
path I'm going to follow? And it's fascinating how it led you to where you are now.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
to your point, like no one really grows up, or at least our generation, we didn't grow up thinking, okay, I'm going to be a YouTuber when I grow up. Maybe today
yeah,
that's changed, right? Because YouTube
yeah,
is such a, integral part of our daily life.
yeah.
But it's definitely a transformation, and it's fascinating to hear about your journey. Just as a side note here, before we dive deeper into all of the English insights that we're going to get to, I've got a random fun question for you. What's something on your bucket list that you're planning to check off in the near future?
I'm not sure. I'm so happy with my life right now. To put it simply, I do want to travel South America. If I
Hmm.
have to choose what my bucket list, even though it's not really urgent, it's not really like a burning desire at
Yeah.
this point in life, I really do want to travel South America. It's definitely my bucket list, but it's not so urgent. But if I'm thinking about a bucket list I want to do this year, I think it would definitely be performing in front of a bigger audience with my guitar and my singing,
Wow.
you know?
Love that.
Yeah, so I mean I do perform a couple of songs every Friday because like my friends and I we are my friend is quite musically inclined. My friend group musically
Mm-hmm.
inclined, and like two of
Mm-hmm.
them or three of them would be performing at this local cafe every Friday, and sometimes I would just like go up there and sing 3 4 songs with my guitar. But I would love to be able to perform in a more established musician community, you know. Yeah, I think that would be one of my bucket list this year at least. You know, so
Fascinating. Yeah, and myself, I also need to put some thought into my bucket list if I ever, want to prioritize doing that. But
yeah,
it's great that to hear that you're feeling content with where you're at right now in life.
yeah.
And I'm sure that if I pull that thread a little bit more and we brainstorm together, there will be some like revelations of, oh, I'd love to do that and that as well. And
Yeah, for
so
sure.
when we would
Yeah.
start putting together a list of like 100 things. Fascinating. Thanks for letting us get to know that side of you as well.
Mhm.
And now shifting focus a bit to your educational philosophy. You've often mentioned that languages are learned, not
Mhm.
taught. Can you
Mhm.
elaborate a little bit on that and
Yeah.
how has that influenced your teaching style? And
Mhm.
what methods do you find most helpful for actually learning the language and not just teaching it?
So those are three questions at once. I'm going to try to go one by one about languages are not taught but
Let's
learned.
just riff on
So,
that. Sorry for overloading that. But yes, your
oh, that's really
languages are
fine.
learned, not taught. So we've have that like maxim, let's say.
Mhm.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
let's just go from there. Yeah.
So that philosophy, languages learned, not taught, has a lot to do with language acquisition. The most common way of learning a language these days, at least in Indonesia, but I do believe this is also applicable to other parts of the world. I think the first thing, if you want to say, I want to be able to speak English, so they go to a class, you know. But that's not the most effective way because you are being taught a language. Yeah? And even let's say you go to a class, language acquisition in the sense is quite a personal journey. It has something to do with like you have to be able to get yourself exposed, immersed, and interact with the language as much as possible. Being taught a language in a classroom, I hardly ever find people that can reach fluency through a classroom setting. You know, they're being taught, right? Because a classroom setting is oftentimes, how do I say, especially in classrooms in high school where you're just kind of like forced to learn a language, that barely ever works because in order for you to learn a language, you have to be open, you have to be receptive, you have to be in a place where you want to learn the language. If you are forced to take a language class and you're not really, if your head is not really there, it doesn't matter what you are taught. If you are not open to learning, it's just going to be a lost cause. It's just gonna be like
Absolutely.
you're just gonna be learning a couple of like random vocabulary or grammar points. You do in an exam, and then in the end of the class, that's done. So to put it very simply, languages are learned, not taught. First, it has something to do with like taking ownership of the learning process. You cannot depend on someone else to teach you a language. It all has to come from you first. You have to be in a place where you are receptive and you are open to learning this language. Because if you're not open, you're not receptive, whatever knowledge is coming your way, you're not going to absorb that as well. And two, it has something to do with being it's a more of a personal experience. You have to get exposed, get immersed a lot in the language. You have to interact a lot with the language, and that is how you learned. Being taught a language by another person is not the most effective way for you to learn. Some people might agree, some people might disagree, and I would love to have your thoughts on this too if you want to like banter about it.
No, well, I'm totally on board with that. And I love that you touched on the concept of acquisition, which, as you
Mm-hmm.
said, is internal. It's a
Yeah.
personal process.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot make you acquire something. I could just tell you information, and it's on you
Mm-hmm.
to,
Mm-hmm.
what you're gonna do with that. You're gonna
Yeah.
internalize it. It's gonna come in one ear, come out the other ear, and it's really personal, and it's
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be emotionally invested as well,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
can hardly ever find that emotional connection just by going to a classroom, right? It can
Yeah.
help in the beginning. It's not like it doesn't work at all. Like it's got its place, and I think we're on the same page on this. I've always told my students to kind of like put it in a in a simple way that, all right, so you are attending class. You're even like when I taught students one-on-one, I told them, all right,
Mhm.
so we are meeting 2 hours or 3 hours per week. That's
Yeah.
great. I'm going to teach you something. I'm going to maybe answer some of your questions, but
Mm-hmm.
that alone won't get you very far. I mean, you've
Mm-hmm.
got however many hours are there in a week, right? Or like
Yeah.
24 hours in a day. You're just investing 1 hour on this, which is in and of itself great. It's a great start, but there is so much more that you can do on your own
Mm-hmm.
to keep improving. And I always told them,
Exactly.
okay, so you're investing 1 hour with me. Now, on your own, you should spend 4 hours more
Yeah.
playing with the language, being curious, being exposed
Exactly.
to it. And so that
Exactly.
is the way that you're going to actually, get closer to the level that you are aspiring to get.
Exactly. And also learn it's good to know that learning can take in many forms. Learning can be from reading a book. Learning can be from having interactions, conversations like this. Learning could also be just watching movies, watching TV shows in your target language. That is why learning is a personal thing that has to come from you. You have to be the one doing the actions. Even and opposite to that is being taught, and that is having someone else giving you knowledge of the language. So being taught is almost passive. Learning is more active. It comes from you as well. So yeah, this is why, like, even let's say in my classes, when I was in university, I was taught a lot of subjects. But if I was unwilling, there was no willingness for me to learn the subject. Anything that I was taught would just go from one ear and out the other. It's also, yeah, that's why I said about like being in the state of being open to learning.
Yeah, you did mention being receptive to
Yeah.
learning, and that is absolutely key. So, Nyla, building on that foundation, let's actually talk about a common challenge many English learners face, and that is the
Mhm.
intermediate plateau. The
Yeah.
intermediate plateau. Nyla, how do you define that? And what are your thoughts on that? How do you help people overcome that, to push through or to push past that barrier that many
Mhm.
learners face, the intermediate plateau?
So intermediate plateau is actually my area of expertise when it comes to teaching English, or like helping my clients and my students to learn themselves. Intermediate plateau is basically a stage, and this is generally applicable to any aspect of skills and development activities. So this concept of intermediate plateau is applicable to, let's say, if you're learning to play the guitar, if you're learning how to code, and of course, if you're learning a language, learning English. So it's basically the stage where you have finally reached a level where you're kind of good enough. You are kind of functional in it, but you're having difficulties leveling up to the next level, leveling up to, let's say, advanced or like upper intermediate and all of that, because of a variety of reasons. So and that's what my channel is mostly about. I talk about these different challenges that you face in intermediate plateau. And usually the learning curve goes like that, right? I think, if of course, for the listeners of the podcast, probably will not be able to see my finger, but it kind of has a bit of an backwards S shape.
Yeah,
So it says
yeah.
that if you're a complete beginner, you are at level 0. From 0 to just kind of beginner, the progress is usually very fast, because every new word or new grammar points, grammar rules that you learn, you feel like, oh my God, look at me. Like, I am learning A, B, C, D, E. I'm learning pronunciation. I'm learning grammar, blah, blah, blah. And then you feel like your progress is so fast. But then once you're at an intermediate, it feels like 10 new words that you're learning every day just doesn't seem to make a big difference.
Hey, English hero, pardon the pause here on this amazing conversation with Nyla. If you're looking to not just listen or like absorb this information, and instead actively engage with these ideas and look for ways to implement this into your life, you can download the Crush the Intermediate Plateau PDF that I put together. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm holding my phone here with the PDF open, and it's full of great tips and insights. It's an expansion on what Nyla and I discuss in the episode. It's got a little bit more information, but in a way that it's very easy to digest. It has tips on how to cultivate a growth mindset, how to balance explicit instruction with implicit learning, and how to choose resources that challenge and engage, and a lot more actually. So don't miss out on maximizing your learning with this great resource. Download it using the link down in the description of this podcast. So now let's get on with the show.
So this is why a lot of people feel like they're in the plateau, because one of the reasons why they're stuck there is because at the intermediate level, they keep on doing beginner exercises. They still use methods that are more effective as a beginner, but it's not going to serve them in the intermediate level. So if I can use an analogy about this, is let's say if you're starting a business, and then let's say your milestone is that you want to make $1,000 per month from your business. Your strategy of getting $1,000 per month is going to be, let's say, ABC. But then if you want to finally reach $1,000 per month, and then you want to level up to reaching 10K per month, the strategy is going to be completely different than earning 1,000 euros, $1,000. So your strategy, you really have to pivot your strategy. You really have to change, let's say, from your mindset or like your methods in order to reach 10K per month. So strategies have to be different. But a lot of people make the mistake of using the same strategy as a beginner and apply it in that next level. And that's one of the reasons why you're stuck. So to put it simply, you cannot keep on. So the stuff that gets you from A to B doesn't necessarily get you from point B to C. So that's one of the reasons why, let's say, a lot of people get stuck in the intermediate plateau.
Brilliant point. And I think I agree with you that what got you here is not the same thing that's going to get you there. And it
Exactly.
applies to many things in life. And that's a great philosophy and something that we can teach people. And you're doing that. You're doing a fantastic job at that, teaching people the importance of mindset and the strategy around your learning and learning how to learn and everything that's involved in there. And, I tend to go back to, thinking about things in terms of like mathematical terms. Let's say like 10 words. Okay, that is what you know. Tomorrow I'm going to learn 10 more. So I'm going to actually improve by a factor of 100%. And so that is very noticeable. And in the beginning, as you say, you try to draw that line of progress in the learning. It's really steep and it's really easy to learn something new and to all of a sudden, okay, you're feeling like, okay, I'm just filled with the information and I can't even, it's a bit overwhelming. But when you start to really internalize everything and you start to get closer to intermediate levels, that's when it's a crucial point, right? Like to start to really take it to the next level, to start to going back to the point of acquisition, to acquire the language and to really break through the more advanced English levels. People need to be patient, I think, too, patient with themselves, but making sure they're taking the necessary steps to advance. And at that point, like in the beginning, it's easier to improve by a huge percentage on top of what you already know. But later, it starts to be, okay, just that one tiny percent better every day, that 1% better every day, and that compounds. And through time, that becomes something big, and it's this snowball effect, I think, that starts to come into play. But I do want to continue unpacking that a little bit more with you, because I've seen that on your website and on your channel. You've come up with a very interesting framework for solving the intermediate plateau problem. And you call it the 3M framework. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, of course. So the 3M framework is a framework that I came up with that kind of symbolizes a strategy to pivot from the intermediate plateau. So of course, at first, from the beginner to intermediate, the learning curve is very the progress curve is very steep, and then you're of course in this plateau, right? It flattens out a bit. So that's where, if you are finding yourself stuck in there, the 3M framework is what is going to get you to boost up to the advanced level. Or even if it doesn't advance to the the advanced level, it's going to get you out of the plateau. it gives you the tools to get you out of it. Whether or not you get out of it, it depends on many things. It depends on your goals. It depends on your resources, as in your time, effort, and how your life is set up. And it also depends on, yeah, whether or not you actually want to go into the advanced level. Because a lot of the time, sometimes you don't need to go there. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you just need to be at a, be functional at the intermediate or upper intermediate level, and you just don't need to go past that. And sometimes when you don't have an urgent need to get the advanced level, it's okay to stay there. But what basically the 3M framework, to put it simply, is what is going to get you out of being stuck in the plateau. You know, because if you look at my website, I use the 3M Venn diagram to boost you out of the plateau and go up the advanced level.
Yeah.
So that's how I symbolize it.
Yeah, that's a nice visual representation
Yeah.
of what happens. And
You probably would want to ask me a little bit more about the 3M, right?
what do
Yeah.
those three mysterious M's stand for? Yeah. What is that?
I am just super lucky by the fact that they happen to start with M, you know?
I get it.
Well,
Yeah, as a content creator,
yeah,
you always appreciate those things. Yeah.
exactly. For first, it's mindset, and then two, it's
Mindset.
method, and three, it's materials. Actually, materials, I prefer to call it content, but if I call it content, it would be MMC, which is not going to be as catchy, you know? So I
Mhm.
call it materials or resources, as you call it. So basically, these are the three elements that have to all come together in order to get you out of the plateau. So first, your mindset has to be right. First is thinking yourself no longer as a learner, but as a user of
Mm,
English. So a user of English means that you are an English becomes a daily part of your life. You start watching TVs in English. You start, let's say, learning how to play the guitar in English, learning certain recipes in English. This is embedding or integrating English into your life that you probably didn't necessarily do as a beginner. And two is having a growth mindset, that is believing that English is a skill and it's not an inherent trait that you have. You know, you're not, just because you were not born being able to speak English, or you're not born in a country where English is spoken, that you're just, there's no way that you can get out of it. And three, you need to actually put English on your top priorities in life at this moment. And what does it mean by making something a priority? You set aside time for it. You make time for it. You know, you want to prioritize your family, your relationship, you make time to spend time with them.
mhm.
Your work or your business, you make time to work, or to, like, let's say, build your business. You want to make time, you want to get better at English, you make time to actually learn and expose yourself to English. So that is the very, very important thing, because one of the most important indicator factor of how you of your fluency to English, of your progress to English, is the time that you actually spent with the language. So that is the first M, mindset. Two is the method. Method is basically the strategy, or like the learning approach that you need to do. And to put it simply, the method that I teach my students and my clients do is a combination between explicit and implicit method. So explicit method is basically the classic approach where people learn languages through classroom, through like instructional, let's say, through instructions in the classrooms. Whereas implicit is the more natural way people learn languages, like children, like through exposure, interaction, and immersion. That's a word, immersion. And what is the best approach? The best approach is not one or the other, but is to find a balance of them, because each of these methods, approaches, have its pros and cons. Implicit, which is like the acquiring the language naturally, is a lot more fun. It makes a lot more sense, but it's actually slow. If you just keep exposing yourself to English without actively learning it, it's going to be very slow. Because
It's
like
gonna
people
take
would
time.
say, yeah, I keep listening to English music, English TV shows, blah blah blah, but for some reason I'm not improving. Why is that? Because you are not deliberately learning it. And this is where explicit learning can help you speed up your progress. Because explicit learning, the cons is that, of course, it's boring. It rarely produces fluent speakers in the classroom, but you are actively learning. You're using your brain a lot in trying to decipher language patterns. Like that's where the logic comes in, like
Yeah.
trying to input words and trying to string sentences together, using the grammar rules and all of that. So this really activates your brain. So if you use the pros of explicit teaching, which is like the pattern recognition and all that, and being and having like an open eye of like new words or patterns and all of that, and then you combine it with the pros of the implicit, which is a lot more fun, a lot more relevant to your way, that is actually a recipe for faster progress to English.
I love that. And I think that is the one of the most important concepts when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
learning English, to learning pretty much anything. I tend to use more like the words active and passive. There's a lot of literature actually
Yeah.
that supports those ideas. One of the things about explicit learning or focused learning or active
Mm-hmm.
learning is that it can be fatiguing. It actually takes an effort, which is both good and bad. Good in the sense that,
Yeah,
okay, that is what it takes for you to start to internalize new information, to break down different
exactly.
patterns, and to put the puzzles together.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what speeds up the process. Because if you just let everything kind of like sink in with time by via passive exposure, it's not going to be as solid. And
Precisely.
that, it takes it takes effort. I break it down
Mm-hmm.
as energy plus attention, and that is
Yeah,
what you need to invest time in actually, being a take making an effort. But
exactly.
then there's the implicit, the passive learning, and the advantage of that is that
Fun.
it doesn't take much effort.
Yeah.
It's not going to fatigue you. All the opposite. It's actually good for relaxing. And that is,
Mm-hmm.
just watching a TV show on Netflix, or watching a YouTube video, or
Mm-hmm.
reading, or listening
Yeah.
to music, or just engaging in some social interaction with someone else in the language.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That could be like a certain overlap there too, a bit of
Yeah.
implicit learning when you're like over analyzing what the other person is saying. Oh, he just said that cool idiom. Oh, interesting. But that's
Yeah.
a different different process, I think. So active learning, explicit learning, and then passive implicit learning. And if I actually put this as a graph,
Mm-hmm.
let's say 7 days of the week, however many hours the week has, I would have to actually open up my calculator, but you could spend maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. That would be amazing. That shows great dedication. And you could spend that engaging in implicit learning. But then
Mm-hmm.
what about all the other time left in the week?
Yeah.
That's where you allocate that implicit learning. And
Mm-hmm.
the more you do that, the better off you're going to be. And it goes back to your comments about living your English via
Yeah.
actually being exposed to it more than before. And that's one of the big things that differentiate beginners
Yes,
from
exactly.
intermediate, and especially from advanced users of
Yeah.
the language. The amount of time they
Yeah.
actually
Exactly.
spend immersed, exposed to the language they want to master.
Yes, exactly. When it comes to like explicit learning, it's very like the criteria of making it explicit is that it has to be uncomfortable for you. It has to
A
be
little
like,
bit.
oh, yeah, it has to be a bit like, I don't want to do it. If you have that feeling, you're actually doing explicit learning. Because I also see that, of course, in language learning and like, let's say playing the guitar as well. I think for like many years, I was only playing the same chords. I play every day. Why am I not progressing? Of course, because I always play with like 4 or 5 chords that I know. And only when I start learning like the different scales and the different pentatonic and all of that, that's when I know, okay, of course now I'm improving because I was having difficulties learning it, So that's when I know when I'm uncomfortable, that's when I'm doing it right. When you feel comfortable speaking English to new people, that's when you're doing it right. And the key is to push through the discomfort of learning the harder parts and then up to a point where you feel like, this is getting easier now. And then that becomes a new comfort zone. So
Yeah.
if you're wondering whether or not I'm doing explicit or implicit learning, ask yourself how uncomfortable I am with this. If there's just, slight discomfort in doing these activities, that's when, you're explicitly learning. You're getting out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Brilliant point, Nyla. And how about that last materials?
Oh, yeah. It's the material. Material is basically the resources that you use to learn English. Because, I think I actually saw an analogy in a book, like you can be like the best pizza maker in the world, but if your ingredient is not good, then you're also not going to create, it doesn't matter. Maybe like the tomato is just not fresh, or like the meat is just low quality and just really not tender at all, and then you use that in an ingredient. Doesn't matter if how good of a chef you are with your way of doing pizza. If the ingredient is just crap, it's not going to taste as good, So it's the same. If you know exactly the right method, and you have the right mindset to learn English, but the materials that you use do not represent real English, or it's not really giving you English that you actually need, that is not relevant to you, it's just going to be a bit useless, So because material, the resource that you use is very important, because this is where you're getting input, and then if your input is crap, your output is naturally also going to be crap, to put it very rudely, So what makes the right content? First, there are three things. You can think about it as CAR. First, it has to be challenging. The content that you need to have to also improve is English that is just slightly above your level. So if, let's say you are learning this podcast, English through this podcast, and you are able to understand everything, and you're not learning any new words, and then this piece of content that you're listening to is a little bit too easy for you. It's not challenging enough. So first, it has to be challenging. And it has to be authentic. Authentic means that it's content that is made by native speakers to native speakers. It's not content that is made, let's say, for people to learn English. Let's say like my content, for instance. I create content that is optimized for English learners. I speak slowly, I speak clearly, and I simplify my words. A lot of people, actually what I love about my channel is that I see a lot of comments that say, oh, first I was watching your videos in Bahasa Indonesia, and then in English, I wasn't able to understand. But now, the more I watch your English content, I start to understand everything.
Yeah.
So there's like a sense of progress. I love that, So, but if you're at a level where you understand my content, or like non-authentic content, it's important for you to level up to authentic content. It's content that is made not for English learning, but just made by native speakers for native speakers.
Yeah.
And then that means relevant. Content that is relevant for you is content that you are going to use in real life. Content relevant to you is like content that you actually enjoy consuming. I think there was a time where I was kind of like in my learning phase in my life, where I want to learn a lot of things. I want to learn about astronomy, I want to learn about history, blah, blah, blah. But I realized that these types of content I wasn't very interested in. It wasn't relevant to my life. I'm not going to use this knowledge very much. So what happens then? I forget it almost immediately. Then I was binge reading about like the history of I think what was it? Yeah, like life in ancient Egypt, but I wasn't able to reiterate what I learned to my friends the next day, because it was just not interesting enough for me, And okay, it's cool, I learned about ancient Egypt, but it's irrelevant to my life at that point. Also, something about like, if I want to read a book about, let's say, I'm dealing with some business problems right now, but I'm reading a book about relationship problems, how to improve my relationship right now, even though it's not a problem that is relevant to my life. It's just going again in one ear and out the next, So it has to be content that is relevant to your life in order for you to retain it, And also, let's say, at this moment, you want to learn English to improve your conversational skills in the workplace. Then you make sure you watch content that's going to get you there, that's going to teach you how to get better at English being a communicator in the workplace, and not binge watch on content about, K-drama, or like Love Island, or Love is Blind, or stuff like that, So your input and output has to match, basically, and that's what makes something the right content. The first, challenging; A, authentic; and R, relevant to your life right now and relevant to your interest. That is the last M.
Brilliant, great breakdown, and relevant, authentic, challenging. English hero,
Mm-hmm.
if you got those things, you're doing great. So keep on doing that. And yeah, just go to the things that you care about.
Mm-hmm.
That's important. That's what makes it relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is something that you're intrinsically motivated to get involved in? Yeah, unfortunately, what tends to happen with a lot of people that they don't have that awareness,
Mm-hmm.
that is what, like a lot of times with learners, what tends to perpetuate them in the intermediate plateau is interacting with material that they're given, that
Mm-hmm.
someone else tell them that, okay, this is a good material for you to look at
Mm-hmm.
and to, maybe listen to or watch.
Yeah.
Uh, it might come in the form of a textbook, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where everything is pre-packaged and it's
Yeah.
given. And one of the things that I sometimes say is the best learning method is a learning method that you yourself design. Of course, if you are in a
Mm-hmm.
position to actually thoughtfully design a method for yourself, and by that I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the things that you're watching and the activities that you're doing and what
Yeah.
you're doing to engage in focused, explicit learning and
Yeah.
also implicit, passive exposure. When you have those elements be synergistically aligned with
Mm-hmm.
your intrinsic values and the things that you like doing,
Exactly.
you are going to be in a good position to continue by being
Yeah.
impatient, advance the 1% every day,
Yeah.
and that's how you create progress and
Yeah.
eventually just crush your goals. Yeah.
Yeah, because it has to be all interconnected for you to remember the things that you learn, right? Because if it's just kind of like all over the place, it's just very random, it's very likely for you to forget these things. Because in order to remember, you need to hook new knowledge into existing knowledge and through interconnectedness.
Right.
Alignment. Exactly.
Everything
Exactly.
aligns with who you are, and because
Yeah,
you're a very unique individual who will have
exactly.
a very unique method
Mm-hmm.
that method is the best possible method that is just made for you, custom sized
Exactly.
to your needs, to your likes, to
Mm-hmm.
your goals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. All right, Nyla, let's land the plane with one last question. But before we do that, why don't you let our audience know where they can find you on the internet? We've talked about your channel, right? Your YouTube channel, of course. The name of your channel is your name, right?
Yes, my YouTube channel name is Naila Farhana. Um, and then yeah, that's where I'm the most active. And also on Instagram, you can find me, of course, also Naila Farhana. That would just be me and pictures of my cats and my travels. And for my if you wanna get more bite-sized videos of my tips, you can find that Nailingua. So it's Nailingua. And if you're interested to work with me, I've actually had a couple of Spanish speaker students before. That would be nilingua.com.
Excellent. All right. Amazing. English hero, go and check out Nyla's work. It's
Thank you.
world class. And Nyla, so we've talked about the intermediate plateau, the idea
I've
that
talked.
languages aren't taught, they're learned. We've talked about the importance of mindset. I think we've done more than enough to set the stage for one final question. And it's not a question that I intend to ask you, it's a question from you to our audience, to the listener out there. What is one last question that would prompt reflection that you'd like to leave our audience with? Let them
Okay.
reflect upon that.
So for audience of English Hero podcast, I want to ask you, if you're really serious about learning English, what is the one thing that you are willing to sacrifice to get better at English? What is the one thing that you are willing to let go of in order to make time to improve your English?
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Sacrifices and letting go.
Yeah.
Love
I,
that. And
Mhm.
Nyla, you've nailed it. with the idea of priority, right?
Yeah, exactly.
How much are you, just to complement your thought there and your question, are you prioritizing English fluency, achieving it? Just envision the person you want to become. How good in
Mm-hmm.
English is that person?
Yeah.
And what are you willing to do to get there? What's the actions, the set of actions that you are willing to do? And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to take some sacrifice, right? In order
100%.
to get to that place. Nyla, really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a really enlightening conversation. I've had a ton of fun with you today.
It's been a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to be invited here and talk extensively about my area of expertise and also to some extent my passion. And yeah, it's been a huge pleasure. Thank you so much, Max, for having me. And I hope that we get to talk again one day.
We'll sure do, Nyla. Really appreciate it. All right, English Hero, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Nyla, where we explored several big ideas that you can start implementing in your English learning journey. Key takeaways include languages are learned, not taught, the importance of implicit and explicit learning, and how to conquer the intermediate plateau with the 3M framework. That's a mindset, method, and materials. Now, if you want to move from passively receiving this information to actively engaging with it, once again, I encourage you to download the free PDF that accompanies this podcast. Download it, conquer the intermediate plateau, and accelerate towards becoming your most fluent, confident, and capable self in English. This has been a lot of fun, English Hero. You know what to do now. Keep learning, keep growing, keep living your English, and until next time.